Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are dialing in from. My name is Hamish. I'm CEO at Kizima, and we're going to speak to you for around half an hour to give you a brief overview about how to register your medical device in China. Just a couple of admin points. We're going to, as I mentioned, speak for around half an hour. Okay, so yes, I introduced myself. I'm Hamish. I'm a lawyer by training, qualified in New South Wales, Australia, and also in Hong Kong. I'm speaking to you today from Australia. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself,
Yes,
please?
my name is Anna King. I've been working for Kizima since 10 years, and I specialize in medical device and cosmetics registration for China. And my background is in biology and in China business, which I studied in the UK and in Hong Kong, and I'm now speaking to you from Hong Kong.
Hello, my name is Cristina Ribó. I'm working in the German office. I'm taking mainly care of Spanish-speaking customers, and I have more than 20 years of experience in business consultancy.
So first, I would like to introduce Kizima to you. Kizima stands for China Service Management, and we are a regulatory affairs consultant and CRO for China. We were founded in 2002 in Munich, as well as in Beijing, by Stefan Fischer, a former Siemens engineer. We now have 12 offices and about 100 employees. Most of them are based in mainland China on the ground. So if you're interested in any regulatory updates, feel free to sign up to our monthly newsletter. You can find the sign up on our website.
Yeah, and although we're talking to you today about medical device and to a lesser extent IVD, we also cover various other sectors, including, as you can see on the slide, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics products, health foods, industrial goods, and consumer goods.
Today, we are going to talk about the pathway to register a medical device in China, the timeline and cost of all the different medical devices. We are going to talk as well about the important figure of the NMPA legal agent and about the different alternative pathways. So,
okay, let's get started. So first, we're going to talk broadly about the various pathways to register your and to sell your medical device into China. The mainland China entry points we classify under the general standard NMPA registration. That is the primary regulator for healthcare products in China, the National Medical Products Administration, which is based in Beijing. The standard NMPA registration requires home country approval, and you'll need to rely on clinical evaluation report or clinical trial data. We'll talk a little bit more about the details in subsequent slides. We'll also just mention briefly the fast track pathways that can accelerate your time to market from a review standpoint, from a contact standpoint at the regulator, a dedicated reviewer, and also some exemptions for post-market sales, such as the innovative medical device application. It would allow you, for example, to be exempt from certain volume-based procurement requirements, which is quite interesting. For an innovative approval, you'll need a China patent, most importantly, but you may not need your home country approval, so that can be quite interesting for a global development regulatory pathway strategy. Talk more about that shortly too. In terms of alternative pathways, I'll mention broadly that there's two. The Hong Kong filing into a Greater Bay Area sales. This has had quite a bit of momentum recently. There's been a lot of policy emphasis here, and we'll mention a little bit more detail later in the slides. Generally, it requires a voluntary Hong Kong listing and then a discussion and procurement by one of the hospitals in the Greater Bay Area to enable the Greater Bay Area sales, which can then allow real-world data gathering and other milestone planning for your broader China entry pathways. The Hainan pilot zone is the other alternative pathway, which is a bit more of a tested route. It's a specific small zone off the south coast of China that allows for CE marked or US FDA marked or other major regulatory approval jurisdiction products to also be sold just into that pilot zone in a much quicker time.
So on this slide, you can see the very important question, is a clinical trial needed when you register your medical device or IVD for China? So we have mapped out 5 questions to go through to guide you. The first one is your product a high-risk device? The NMPA regularly updates this information and releases information what they consider a particularly high-risk product, such as class 3. If yes, then a clinical trial is likely needed. If not, then the next question is is your product maybe on the clinical trial exemption list? Because if it is, then a clinical evaluation or a clinical trial are not needed. If not, then there are still other things to consider. The third question is there sufficient qualifying overseas clinical trial data? Because such overseas data can be used to write your clinical evaluation report. If you do not have such data, then you have one more option. Question 4 leads you to this. You can look for a predicate device that is already registered in China. And the next question, and the last one, is if you then also get enough or legal access to enough clinical data of this predicate device, then you can avoid your own clinical trial in China.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, and it should be emphasized that this specifically relates to the riskier products, class 2 and 3 products in China. And there are 3 risk classes, which Christina will talk about now, and how the costs and timelines look like for each.
Exactly. Also for class 1, you don't need a registration, you just need a filing, and it doesn't cost anything, also any fee, yeah. It takes up to 4 months to register, between 2 and 4 months, yeah. For the class 2, you need a registration, and there is an application fee that you have to pay to the NMPA, and it's about 30,000. It's about 30,000 US dollars. The process takes about 18 months. For a class 3, you have to pay $44,000 and takes up to 21 months. There are additional fees that you have to take into account, and this is a very important fee for the class 2 and class 3 is the type test. This can be quite high. Yeah, you have to take that into account. Then you have the importation and the notarization and translation fees.
Yeah, and we generally give a ballpark figure of a class 1 product is in the order of, if we're talking dollars, then it's 10 to 15,000 USD ballpark for all in costs. That's dossier preparation, translation, and so on. For a class 2 product, it's more like 100 to 120,000 USD. The costs are substantially more because of the application fee and also because of the type testing fee, and the translation fee can be a lot more as well. Class 3 is more like 150,000 USD.
Exactly. So here we have the process of filing a class 1 medical device or IVD. So first you have to prepare the registration documents. This takes about 2 weeks. You don't need any testing, as we said before. It's just a document filling process. You have to write the technical requirements, and then you need to notarize and legalize the documents. The good news is that you don't need to go to the embassy to do that. Yeah. At the end, you have to go in person to the NMPA. You don't have to do that. Your legal agent has to do that. Has to go in person there and present all the documents, and you get a filing certificate that has the technical requirements in there as well. And this, the good news are that this filing doesn't have an end date, so it's yeah. Next slide. I will show you an example of how such a document looks like. And as I said before, this has an indefinitely validity, so you don't have to do that again, the filing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the big red stamp's the important part. So yeah, it's just as an example.
Yeah.
For a class 1 product. Now, for class 2 and 3, which is a much more complicated and lengthy timeline and process, and we already mentioned, Christina mentioned the 18 months and 21 months, respectively, for class 2 and 3. Again, there's a document collection process, which is a few weeks, followed by the technical requirements, the PTR, product technical requirements writing. This is a very important process for class 2 and 3 products because it sets up the parameters along which the local type testing will be conducted. And so that moves into the next stage of your sample transport, because you will have to ship samples to China to be tested in a local Chinese lab. For example, Kizima has staff in specific Chinese labs that will accompany our customers' products and samples to the lab through the test lab to ensure that testing goes smoothly, and errors or problems with the testing from a practical standpoint are addressed as promptly and quickly as possible. The type testing itself takes 3 to 6 months. The actual testing may be a matter of a week or more, but the difficulty is getting into the queue in the lab because there's usually a substantial backup of tests. And your position in the queue only starts once your sample is there, and once the initial fee has been paid to the lab. We've also just set out in this box.
Yeah, Hamish, we've got a question in the chat regarding type testing. It's what is the type testing? Are there safety, EMC, usability software, biocom, etc.? Maybe you can just quickly.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. The answer is yes to all those except for biocompatibility. Biocompatibility tests are tests that you may rely on your test report done outside of China. That's the one testing that you don't need to do again in China. That of course assumes that it's done in a sufficiently qualified lab. And that it's done according to all the requirements for your China submission. But otherwise, yes, it's generally EMC tests, performance tests, safety tests. So yes, that is what the type testing involves, and it's done according to China standards. It should be emphasized that those standards are sort of 90 to 95% equivalent with international harmonized standards, but there are some subtle differences, and that's why the product technical requirements is very important to ensure that the testing is aligned both from the manufacturer standpoint and also from the test lab standpoint. So the other thing we've mentioned in this box, which is therefore quite a busy box, is the preparation of the key data evaluation for your submission. That is based either on the clinical evaluation report, which is marked in blue and also is starred because it's a very key document, or a clinical trial. We're assuming here that a clinical trial is not required for the product submission. However, and a sort of step through the process to determine whether it is or not. The clinical evaluation report, we should emphasize, is not simply a translation of your CER for Europe or elsewhere. Again, it is quite a China-specific document. Yes, your Europe CER will be very helpful, but it has to be written in accordance with Chinese standards. That usually takes 4 months or more to write. So then the rest of the process will be relatively familiar. There's a final dossier preparation stage, followed by the submission to NMPA when the actual submission fee, which Christina mentioned before, has to be paid. After that, there's a review time, following which the NMPA will issue a supplementary notice. That supplementary notice is almost always issued to seek further clarification from the NMPA about the product itself. You have 1 year within which to answer that supplementary notice, and that means not only written responses but also 3 in-person meetings. In fact, there's only 1 official response allowed to the supplementary notice, and after that, a decision will be made as to whether to permit the registration or not. Then there will be the administrative approval process before the certificate is issued, and the total timeline is approximately 18 months for Class 2 and 21 months for Class 3.
Here is including a clinical trial.
Yes, you're quite right. Thanks, Anna, for emphasizing. We're assuming there that the clinical trial is not required. If a clinical trial is needed, then it can take a year or more, and of course cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in addition. Here is an example of a Class 2 or 3 certificate with sort of, specific company details are redacted. We've just highlighted in red along the slide the summary information. In particular, you may be interested in seeing that it's the name of the applicant and production address, as well as the NMPA legal agent details that need to be indicated on the certificate. It has 5-year validity. So then there needs to be a renewal process, which has to be submitted within 6 months prior to expiry. And the NMPA legal agent is a very important role, which Christina will talk to a bit more now.
Exactly. So we have 3 options that you can choose to have your legal agent. One is to choose your distributor. You can have your own subsidiary in China, what is quite costly, or you can go with an independent third party like Kizima. I can explain you the pros and cons with this slide. So if you choose a distributor, maybe the distributor offers you at the beginning to take part of the cost. What it sounds very appealing, but there is some risks behind, because when they are appointed as your legal agent, they have access to all your documents, to all your intellectual property. So they will see all this confidential information, and they will be in charge to talk to the NMPA about all the changes and about all the post-market activities that are relevant for China. So the problem can be that one day you don't have a good relationship with your distributor, and then you will have big problems. No. At the same time, if you want to work with further distributors, probably the distributor who support you to get into the market and get this certification done won't agree. Then you can have your own subsidiary. You have there full control of everything, but you have to have an office there and have the right personnel with experience in regulatory affairs, but it's not quite easy to find. Yeah. And then at the end, the consulting firm is qualified and has experience, is dealing with this kind of registration the whole time, that can help you with customs problems, what are very regular, yeah, and happen very often. And you retain full flexibility because you can choose as many distributors as you want, and you can change the legal agent one day if you want as well, and you have access to all your certificates and documents. And the minus point there will be that you have an annual fee cost, but you have it much higher if you have your own subsidiary as well. So, thank you.
So here we have a question regarding this. What is the difference between the license owner and the legal agent?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And it's important to emphasize the difference, in fact, because you as the manufacturer continue to be the license holder, and you should also retain the certificate. It's and sorry, I'll just go back to the slide here. And so, yeah, and that is something that we sometimes see with distributors playing funny games where they will hold on to the certificate. Some ways they will pretend to be the license holder in some ways as well. But in fact, that's not correct. You as the manufacturer continue to be the license holder. The legal agent is a bit more than a post box. However, it does have post-market responsibilities. It is the point of communication with the regulator. And so it also has an important role to play. Anna,
Yeah,
do you have
so
any
yeah,
additional-
something to add is that the manufacturer is the owner of the certificate, but any foreign company that wants to register their products in China needs a legal entity residing in China to represent them, and that's the NMPA legal agent. So the NMPA legal agent is the official interface to the NMPA. And at the end of the registration process is also the one who receives the certificate. But yeah, you are, as the manufacturer, you are still the license owner.
Yeah, it's just the same as a company entering the EU, for example, needs to have a local authorized representative.
Yeah.
Okay, just in the few minutes remaining, we're going to go briefly through some of the fast track and alternative pathways. Here we'll just talk about innovation approval briefly. It was heavily emphasized in a recent rewrite of the broader medical device regulation, which is popularly known as Order 739. The most interesting thing perhaps to draw out about innovative approval is that you don't require home country approval first, which is something you do need for ordinary or NMPA registration applications, and that it does allow you to be exempted from some volume-based procurement requirements for your product as part of public hospital tendering. I won't go into the detail about what volume-based procurement is, but it's a broad approach by Chinese public hospitals to seek lower prices for medical devices on the basis that there will be a lot more volume. The prerequisite, which is a very important prerequisite, is that there needs to be a China patent right before you can apply. There is very few successful innovative approvals from international manufacturers so far, but here are some examples that have been successful in the last few years, such as from Boston Scientific, Baxalta, and Electa. We've set some examples out here on the slide.
So next, I'll be introducing the priority review procedure, which was implemented in 2017. This is for introducing medical devices that offer a treatment for a specific type of diseases or medical devices that are listed in a special science and technology or R&D project of the China government. Your product is then eligible to apply for priority review if one of the following requirements are met. For instance, if it is urgently needed for clinical use while there are no effective diagnosis or treatments existing in China, or if you are able to demonstrate that there are very obvious clinical advantages of your product for the diagnosis or treatment of rare diseases, geriatric or pediatric diseases. Although the number of priority review applications is comparatively less than to innovation approval, which Hamish just introduced, there are 5 overseas applicants among the total of 11 applications accepted last year, which are also shown here on the slide at the bottom.
Okay, and finally, the third bucket of fast-track approvals is the emergency approval and conditional approval. This is dedicated to meeting sudden urgent demands of overseas medical products, most notably in the window of COVID-19 a few years ago. It's a window that's kind of opened and then closed again when the emergency is deemed to be over. There are very short technical review and administrative review timelines, which then leads to a sort of 1-year validity. It should be emphasized, however, that companies still need to go through in parallel or subsequently the traditional pathways for registration, including things like type testing, including ultimately ensuring that all clinical data is there and extant. Okay, so now we're just going to, in the last minutes, just speak briefly about some alternative pathways. First of all, Hainan pilot zone, which is a medical tourism zone off the south coast of China. It's China's Hawaii. And interestingly, companies can seek to register their products in this pilot zone, which contains 10 hospitals or excuse me, more than 10 hospitals that I've listed here on the slide. These are substantially sort of large departments. Each have their own large departments, so it's more like sort of one mega hospital, you might say. There has been some interesting developments and some success cases as well for companies entering their product based on their overseas country approval, the US FDA or CE mark, to get their product sold in Hainan in short time. That's in sort of 6 to 9 months. Following which companies can gather real-world data on Chinese population that can then allow reduced clinical trial requirements in China, or perhaps even reducing clinical trial requirements altogether as part of their broader NMPA application in Beijing. Given the time, we'll just keep moving. But if you'd like to learn more about Hainan or about Hong Kong listing into Greater Bay Area, please get in touch. Anna, maybe you could go through Hong Kong listing briefly as well.
Yeah, sure. So now I will briefly cover Hong Kong listing. So, and how it connects to the Greater Bay Area pathway as a whole. So medical device products with listing approvals granted by the Hong Kong Medical Device Division will then be publicly listed under the Medical Device Administrative Control System, the MDACS. And this listing information can then be found online on the official MDD website for public access. However, listing your medical device in Hong Kong is not actually a mandatory step for the import or sales of medical device products into Hong Kong. The advantage, however, is that Hong Kong listed medical devices open up business opportunities such as tender submissions to Hong Kong public hospitals, as they would usually prefer products to be already listed under the MDACS system.
Sometimes in the interest of in the interest of time, maybe we just keep moving to there's some further detail which I don't think is important for the broad overview, but it is worth just mentioning this slide here where we have set out the hospitals where you can then sell into in the Greater Bay Area, which has a population of 80 million, which is almost as large as Germany, into these specific hospitals. So once you have Greater Bay Area, once you have Hong Kong listing, you can then seek to have interest from one of these hospitals. And then the hospital itself will support with a submission to the Guangzhou NMPA for sales into that hospital and other potential hospitals in the Greater Bay Area. So this is very interesting because it is a much faster route to start selling into the China market, however, only into this small patch of the China market. Here's some examples as well of products that have been accepted so far since the GBA pathway was first introduced 2 or 3 years ago. You can see there's a variety of products, both drugs and devices and IVDs, which is interesting. Such products should be innovative, and no similar product is already sold in China. And that's really all we wanted to talk to you today about in this short time. It's really just a brief overview and snapshot to get you thinking and to give you a broad understanding about the entry pathways. And Anna, maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the steps, how we can help you along the way.
Yeah, so at Kizima, we can, of course, assist you through the whole life cycle of your medical device or IVD. So today we talked about the second one, which is the registration, and we can support all these steps. We can be your NMPA legal agent or support the filing or registration of your products. We do the type testing, clinical trials, etc. So, but what is not to be forgotten is that there's also a very important phase before the actual registration starts, which is to determine which is the correct regulatory pathway for your company. Also, in a lot of instances, clients are not sure, do we need a clinical trial or not? Then we can perform a feasibility study and write clinical trial protocol designs if necessary. And similarly, once you have gained successful registration, we can help with post-registrations duties such as post-market surveillance, advertisement support, overseas factory inspections, or we can also help to adapt your GMP, QMS, and SOPs to China requirements. And when you're ready to take the step to manufacture in China, We can also assist you with transferring and localizing your product licenses to Made in China as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. And here's a brief snapshot of our offices around the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and look forward to connecting further in the future. And yeah, as Hamish said, if you have any more questions, then feel free to email us.
Thank you.
Christina, yeah. Also, thank you to you as well. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a nice day, nice evening.
See you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.